Happy video day, guys. Today I'm actually super excited because you know at the end of the year when you start to actually look at everything that you've collected for the whole year, all the makeup you purchased, all the palettes you've purchased, and you can kind of just get an idea of how worth those purchases were they. That's kind of how I feel like this video is for me. This is going to be my ranking video of all of the palettes that I purchased in 2020. I really honestly love doing this video because it just kind of just really gives me a thought on whether I made good choices this year or not. For me personally, I love to purchase makeup, especially for YouTube, to show you guys all the new releases, but I also like to make an educated guess before I purchase something to see if it's really going to be something I love or not. So this is the point that I can actually sit back and say, did I do a good job this year or not? So I have every single palette in front of me that I purchased for the year of 2020, and I'm going to run down all of them for you guys and rank them for you guys. So if you guys are excited, don't forget to hit subscribe right now. I'm Christina Brooke. I talk about makeup and fashion on the channel. If you guys like those things, you're probably going to enjoy the channel. So subscribe and let's get into it. So I'm going to go ahead and go from my least favorite all the way to the best, like the one that I love the most this year. And it's going to be a little shocker because I know you guys know I love a certain palette. If you guys have been watching my channel, then you guys know which palette I'm talking about. And it's not number one. So let's go ahead and let's start off with the first one, which would be the palette that I've used the least this year. So this would be the worst of the best, or the worst of all of the palettes I've purchased this year. That's a better way to put it. So that is this one. So this is the Fantascene from Marc Jacobs. Now this was not a new release this year, but it came out in a BoxyCharm add-on, and I always wanted this palette, and it was so inexpensive that I decided to add it to my cart. Now I'm going to tell you guys, it's not a bad palette. The quality is so good in this palette, like all of Marc Jacobs palettes. I just don't understand what it is about the Marc Jacobs palettes that I always get attracted to them, but when I actually purchase them, I realize I hardly ever use them. I don't know what it is, and I'm telling you, I've got a few Marc Jacobs palettes. I'm so gravitated to them. They just draw me in all the time. And I usually can say that they're my least used palettes. What is it? I'm still trying to figure it out. For this palette in specific, I think what it is that the tones in here are just so fair. They're so fair, and on my skin, I feel like it just kind of washes away, and it doesn't give me that depth that I really love with an eyeshadow palette. So I love the deep, this color right here is probably my favorite color, as well as these two. I think these two at the end. This section is probably the best of the palette for me, and then this section is just way too light for my skin. There's another palette in here that kind of has the same situation, but I'm gonna say that I probably have used this one the least. All right, so the next one on the list is going to be this one. Now, this one is this portion of this palette, this one up here. So this is the Viseart Paris Edit. I have my Paris Edit and my Dark Edit mixed together, but it's this section up here, which is Paris Edit. Now, I loved the Dark Edit so much that I definitely wanted the Paris Edit when it released. I just thought that the airy colors of it were just it just drew me in. I feel like I used it okay in the beginning of the year, but then when I started to notice is almost like the same problem that happened with the Marc Jacobs one. There's only a few colors in here that I'm obsessed with, and then some of the others I was like, okay, it looks nice, but it's almost so close to my skin tone that it wasn't really making that big of a difference. When I use the Paris Edit, I use the Dark Edit with it. So combining them both into this Z palette is really what makes me use the Paris Edit. So at the end of the day, it just has to do with my skin tone and the type of looks that I like to do. And as of right now, it just feels like I started drawing myself away from this palette. So it wasn't very used this year. I think in the beginning I used it a lot, and then I just started losing interest, you know? Now the next one is because I'm not in love with the formula. So this is from Dior. This is the Rosewood Neutrals. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that really like this formula. I personally feel like it's a little bit too dry. I like a shadow that you have to build up. And this shadow is the closest that I can compare to the Mario formula. But this one's takes a lot longer to build up. Mario's, I feel like when you start to build it up, you start to see it. It starts to become very seamless. I feel like it just does such an amazing thing to the lid. Whereas this one, I just feel like you have to work it up for not an amazing result. Like it just doesn't blend itself so amazing. It's a beautiful color story. I don't feel like the pigment is there. I really want it to do more. Like at least if I build up a shadow and it really gives me like a depth, I would be like, yay. But this one takes so long to really do that I feel like I just skip over it. Like I just go on to another palette because I'm like, if I want that look, this one just takes too much effort for me to get to it. And the metallics in here are like, okay. So I definitely would rank it there just because of that. And yeah, that's what I'm gonna say. Okay, so the next one is one that has to do with Marc Jacobs again. So I love the color story of this. This is the Extravagance palette. This palette is beautiful. It has such a gorgeous color story. I really love these colors, but there's something missing from this palette. There's just one color, something different, maybe like a peachy tone or something to just really amplify the looks. I feel like every time I use this, I'm like, I'm okay with the look. Like I'm not like obsessed with it. So I like the palette. I like the color story, but I feel like with all of Marc Jacobs palettes, it's almost like it's missing something. There's one color missing. I feel like this color here didn't need to be here. Why did I really need a cream white with this color story? I really didn't. This should have been something fun, like a more interesting color that would really change up my looks a little bit so I can go a neutral route or I can have a little bit of pizzazz to the look. This is like that palette that you don't want to use when you're doing a neutral look and you don't want to use when you're doing a fun look. So it just kind of like sits in the middle. So I just don't really get that much use out of it. Now we're going to go on to one that I really love the color story of, but it has the same issue as some of the other ones. It's like too fair for me. Some of these colors look amazing. I've created some really pretty looks with this. I'm not going to lie. There's some colors in here that are just like, ooh. Like I feel like I love the way it turns out. But then there's some colors in here that just for my skin tone is such a waste color. It just doesn't do enough for me. So it's like one of those palettes that's like, it's okay. It's not perfect. It has an issue. And mostly the issue is it's a little too light. But other than that, the formula on it was pretty damn good. So the next one, I'm going to give it to this guy right here. So this is the Wayne Goss Imperial Topaz. So this palette I love. I think it's a beautiful palette. It's just some of the other palettes I feel like I got more use out of. I love the color story of this. There's only one little tiny problem. One problem with this palette. Sometimes when I use this palette, the next day, my eyes are a little bit dry. So I don't know if there's a formula inside of here, like not all of them. I feel like there's one shadow in here that irritates my eyes. And only for that reason, I don't use it as much as I would love to. Love this color story. This is such a beautiful palette and the way it glides on the lids and everything about it I love. I just can't figure out for the life of me what is it that makes my eyes dry the next day. I can't figure it out. If you guys know, please leave me that comment because I'm dying to figure that out. Maybe it's just one shadow that I have to not use, but I kind of like did a process of elimination. In the beginning, I didn't know it was this. I thought it was the mascara. Then later I blamed it on the eyeliner. And then like I kept on blaming other things and I was like, it's not that palette. Then later I just realized and I put everything together and I was like, every time I use that one palette, maybe it's the palette. So I'm down to the conclusion a few months later that it could be this. So that's why it's here because I just honestly sometimes don't feel like waking up with my eyes dry. So I just don't use it. But other than that, beautiful. Okay, the next one is this one. So this is Khaki Obsessions. So I use this one more than Imperial Topaz because I don't have an issue with the formula. I think that this palette is beautiful. Some of the shadows in here are a little bit drier than others, but it is so gorgeous. I feel like the looks that I create with this are amazing. I actually like to mix this palette sometimes with a more neutral palette and bring in some of these colors. Some of you guys are probably saying that looks neutral enough, but sometimes I want something a little bit lighter. So that's where I'll jump into another palette for, but I love this. I think this is a beautiful palette. The only critique I think I would give this one is I wish it had a little bit more green in it. Like, just a little bit more green. Okay, so now we're getting to the wire, guys. I feel like all the next ones are really high contenders here. So yeah, this is hard. Next one, I'm gonna give it to Natasha Denona's TrioChrome. Now the TrioChrome in general is a very pretty color story. I feel like lately I've used it a lot more just because I guess it's new and I've been wanting to do a lot of looks with it. The looks that I create at the end always come out kind of cool, but I don't really love the TrioChromes in the middle, and I know that's the point of the palette is this TrioChrome. I don't think that they kind of like, I don't know, they don't shift enough for me to be like, oh my goodness, look how they shift. But they shift just enough for me to be like, ooh, they shift. And I know you're probably like, what is she talking about? When I'm creating eye looks, I sometimes like to know where the color is going to go. So I hate to put on a color and then I did this whole cool eye look and then when I switch, it changed colors on me and then I don't like the way it looks with the rest of the eye. I feel like TrioChromes or dual chromes, they do that so much to me. Like I'll be seeing one color when I'm creating the look and then I turn my lid, I'm like, no, stay like this. Don't get in the light, you know? So I don't love the TrioChromes. And I thought that maybe if these had like this amazing shift to them, that it was almost like, oh my goodness, she looks like she came out like a space movie or something, that I would be like, hey, okay, now I can get on board. But these to me just look like regular shifty shadows that really don't shift enough. So they're just like whatever. So the mattes in here though, whew, I love these mattes. So that's why it's a little higher on the list because I love Natasha Denona's mattes, and to have all of these really cool colors in her matte formula is the reason that I'm excited with it because I'm a sucker for Natasha and I just got a bunch more mattes. So okay, so the next one is, now it starts to get a little bit hard for me, but I'm going to give it to Huda Beauty's Naughty palette. So this is the new Naughty Nudes. I really like this palette a lot. I have not used it like extremely, like to the point that I'm like, oh my goodness, I've used this palette like every day. But I feel like I've used this palette so much for the time limit that I've had it, and I really like the looks I come out with it. I wish that it had a little bit more plum in it. Like I know there's some plums, but I just wanted just a tad bit more plum. And sometimes I'll see myself going, oh, well, I kind of just want to jump into another palette to get something a little deeper. But I do really like this palette. I love the metallics in here. They just glide on the lid. I'm obsessed with this color right here. I've used this so much in the inner portion. Like it's like obsession. This color is beautiful. I love this palette. It's absolutely stunning. It's just not like an everyday palette for me. I can use it every day, but I feel like some of the ones that are coming up are the ones that I've been grabbing a lot, you know? Okay, so the next one, the mini Zendo palette. I really like this palette. I like it more now than I did when I first bought it. I feel like I use this so often. The thing with this one though is I mix this one. Like I like to use this with another palette. I usually use this with the mini Glam palette, or is it that? Yeah, the mini Glam. I really like it mixed together. So I feel like this is a beautiful palette. I love the way the color story looks. The only thing is like this really, really deep shade right here. Sometimes I don't like to use it with the rest of this. Something's missing in here. It needed like a deepening matte. So that's why I usually use it with something else. But every time I use this palette, I love the way the looks come out. So I just love this palette, but I like to mix it. So, okay, so the next one, this is where it starts to get really, really hard for me because it's like, do I go by like stuff that I use the most or stuff that I like the most? So I'm going by the stuff I use the most, but you know, Celestial Divinity. This is pretty high up there because I'm obsessed though with the metallics in here, and the mattes are amazing too. The only thing for me is this color story is not a color story I tend to gravitate to or use daily, but anytime that I think of like doing a colorful lid, I just don't even look elsewhere. I just say, oh, Celestial Divinity is where it's at, and I grab this palette. I love the looks that I have created using it. I just think everything just looks so seamless and beautiful, and I don't know, like this palette was just so worth it. Like I don't even feel like I need to buy another Pat McGrath unless it's something so different, because this was just, it gave me so much. It gave me so much, and I love it. If you guys picked it up, let me know what you guys think. I don't love the packaging. I think the packaging was a little cheapified, but I do think the product inside, super good. So I'm okay with it. Okay, so now we're getting down to the wire. We're getting to the ones that I like the most. This is very, very hard at this point, really hard. Cutting Edge from Dose of Colors. Guys, this was such a beautiful palette this year. I feel like when they did greens, they did it right. I love the color combinations. I love the metallics in here. I've used this on its own, and I just love the looks that come out. I think that this was a gorgeous palette. Even this limeish green that I thought that I was going to not love the way it looks with some of the other colors. It's my least favorite color in the palette, and I still like it. So I honestly think that this was a knockout palette. I'm so happy I got this one. Out of all the greens I picked up this year, I still feel like this one was my favorite. Like I just feel like it was that good that I'm like, yes, I'm so happy to have you in my life. It is beautiful. Okay, so the next one, I'm going to give it to the Mario's Mattes palette. I use this palette so much, guys. Like, so much. I just feel like lately I just grab this palette because it's just so easy to use. I love the formula. As you build it up, you create this real seamless eye look. Like, I feel like it just blends. And because you're not putting on so much pigment right away, you actually create the look and it looks a lot more even. I feel like sometimes, even with Celestial Divinity, you have to be a little careful with some of those mattes because if you put it on too dark to try to blend out something like that, it's just never gonna look seamless. I feel like Mario did it right with his formula to really make looks look seamless, but they do build up. The problem I have with the Dior one is this one just, it takes so long to build up that I don't feel like it's doing any magic for me. I feel like this one does have that beautiful, flawless blendability, and I love this. I love this palette. It's used so often for me, and I would put it higher. It's just it doesn't have any metallics in it, so I always have to grab into another palette. It's not like a one and done palette, so that's why it's there. Okay, so now it gets very hard because the last three palettes that I have sitting in front of me, oh gosh, do I love them. And there's one here that is like my baby. But there's some other ones that I just feel like the color story is just so beautiful. So I'm going to go ahead and just say Soft Glam is going to come in on third. I know some of you guys are going, how is that possible? You love it. I do love this palette. I really, really love this palette. And I've used this palette like crazy. But there was two other palettes that I purchased this year that I noticed that I started using more than Soft Glam. And this is like throughout the entire year, you know, during quarantine that I'm stuck here in the house and I'm trying to pick a palette to use. Soft Glam, I feel like I was using it like a lot when I was like going to work and I was doing other things and I was constantly in my daily life. I was like, oh my goodness, this is like heaven sent to me. But then when this whole thing happened that I had to like be creative and play with other palettes, I feel like there was some other palettes, which are the two that are coming up, that I really feel like I got so much use out of and I really love them. So this is the part that gets very hard for me. Two that are left over, I love them for different reasons. And it's hard for me to pick which one is number one. So I think at this point I can just tell you that it could go either way here. It really could go either way. But the one I'm putting on number one is mostly because the color story I'm like obsessed with. So I'm going to give number two to this guy. So this is the Glam palette from Natasha Denona. This could have been a contender for number one, but I just have to stay true to what I want in number one. But this is such a beautiful palette. I never knew how much that I could really love a cool tone lid until this palette. This palette has changed me forever with cool tones. I love the dramatic smoky lids that I've done with this. And doing a smoky eye, I know a lot of people always go like you need to use black with gray, but black with brown is really more of the way that you can do a dramatic smoky. I know some of you guys wanted me to do the carbon black smoky eye for me to do it for you guys, and I'm going to do that video. And mostly I use this palette, so just so you guys know, but I'm obsessed with this. It's so beautiful and it was worth every dime. And Natasha Denona is like my favorite. Like honestly, I'm obsessed. That leads us into number one. Now, number one for me is not because I only use this one on its own, because I do feel like sometimes I need to mix and sometimes I do like to go into another palette. But the color story on this guy, and I just feel like the direction that this one is going is something I really hope is expanded. The mini retro. I love the mini retro, guys. This color story is everything to me. I love the greenish gray color in here that it actually looks a little green, but it's really like a gray. I kind of broke it, so that's why I'm trying not to open it too much. But if you guys can see, this is the most beautiful palette ever. It's on the lighter side, but I am able to get this greenish gray to deepen out my outer edge enough that I'm like, oh, this looks so pretty. But I love this. Like, I love this. I love this. I love this. I love it so much. Yes, there is a few things. Yes, I would have liked maybe a different color than these two pinks. If they would have put something a little deeper, maybe like a real nice hunter green, I would have been like obsessed. But I love this palette so much. Anytime I'm looking for a look and I don't feel like going the soft glam route or the cool tone route, I grab this one. So I just feel like this one, honestly, the last three are just all my favorite. Like, I honestly can't really pick, but I just feel like this color story is where it's at for me. And Natasha Denona gods, please, a large retro next year, a midi retro, anything. Just make this a big palette and make sure it has greens. please make sure it has greens, but pretty greens. Pretty greens. Ah, that is me ranking every single palette that I purchased this year. I hope I didn't miss any, but I really went through my whole list and tried to find them all. And that's where I'm gonna leave it. The last three, like, you know, my favorites, they're a toss-up. Like, I love them all. I don't even know. They're all amazing. So anyways, I hope you guys really enjoyed this video, and leave me your comments down below. What do you guys think? Did you guys have any of these palettes? What was your favorite for the year? I love to read that. I have another video that's coming up very soon that's going to be a regrets video, all based off of my Make Up Your Mind and my decisions. That's coming really soon, and wait until you guys see that, because I didn't even know how many palettes released this year, guys. Oh my god. Wait until you see that video. But anyways, thanks so much for watching. Hit subscribe so you see me again. Notification bell. Talk to you guys later. Bye. Pooh. Trying to take a thumbnail. Oh, the dangers of a thumbnail. I hope that didn't break.